morning.
Hello, hello.
Chimeza. Thank you.
A very good morning to you all. And we are very happy to have you around for the fourth iteration of the LIBSENSE Open Science Symposium. You may call it Botswana Open Science Symposium. My name is Ifa Amponsa, and I must say I'm already enjoying your country. Thank you very much. Such a beautiful country, such warm people, forward-looking country. I happen to be the Communication and Marketing Officer for WACREN, the leader of LIBSENSE initiative across Africa, together with other RENs that you know, like the UbuntuNet Connect, UbuntuNet Alliance, sorry, and then the ASREN, the Arabic States Research and Education Network. We have gathered here for a simple purpose of having a conversation around open science in Botswana. As we are all aware, across the world, open science phenomenon is sweeping across the world, and every nation is getting onto it. The UNESCO recommendation on open science is taken on center stage in various countries across the world. And in Africa, LIBSENSE is leading, you may say, the implementation of open science in various contexts across Africa. And of course, we do it together with the other regional RENs that you know, and the NRENs in various countries. So for instance, in Nigeria, we worked with EcoConnect to have a similar event. In Cote d'Ivoire, the same. In Ghana, we did with the Ghanaian Academic Research and Education Network. And we are so happy to work with BotsREN, the Botswana Research and Education Network, the Botswana Libraries Consortium, and other partners to make this happen. This is about Botswana. This is our own. So we want to have a very insightful conversation about how to advance open science in this context. Without much ado, we would like to just kickstart the event. It's already 9:10 here in Botswana. UTC is 7:10. And I know, I'm told that we have quite a number of viewers watching across the world on our YouTube channel and also on Zoom. So very soon we'll be sharing the links on the screen so you can also share with other people. All right, so without much ado, we want to welcome Prof. Sheldon Masupe. I'm happy to welcome Prof here because Prof has been very, very, very cooperative for this event to happen. Prof is the CEO for BotsREN, and we're happy to have him to welcome us before we move to other parts of the program. Please let's put our hands together and welcome Prof. Sheldon Masupe.
Thank you very much, Minister. What time do you want to leave? What time do you want to leave? Because that will dictate how much I speak. I can say welcome and all right, okay. Honorable Minister, and let me say all protocols observed. I recognize the dignitaries here. Our minister needs to run, so so sometimes when we stand up and we speak, we speak for a very long time, even when we are supposed to be doing welcome remarks. I've seen that whenever I was supposed to ush myself here, he went on a great deal to explain the event, but that said, it gives me a very great honor to be part of this Open Science Symposium and to welcome you to this session. And I'm aware that the gathering here comprises of policymakers, library communities, researchers, social innovators, and hopefully some funders as well. Today's theme, Advising Open Science in Botswana, the role of stakeholders, is very relevant, especially for us here in Botswana and ourselves as BotsREN. Will be depending on you to drive the open science movement. This open science movement advocates for making scientific research and its dissemination entirely transparent process, freely accessible to all levels of society. We are gathered here to dialogue on how we can leverage on the power of open science to be assessed by all for the benefit of all humanity. Our hope lies in you to unlock the information access for the sake of future generations. We saw during the COVID pandemic how open science was vital. During the pandemic, we appreciated and witnessed greatly than ever before how open science made it possible for sharing knowledge, working together, collectively mobilizing resources and research towards one common end. Collaboratively, we were able to develop public health guidance, treatment protocols, vaccines. The scientific community shared knowledge and data, making technology solutions possible to be accessed by all. An example was the genome sequencing data, which was made available. My other employer, which is B3, happened to play part in that regard. We also witnessed open designs for personal protective equipment. It is encouraging that UNESCO is one of the organizations which has taken charge in driving the open science movement. The UNESCO recommendation on open science was adopted by the General Conference 2021, and I think 193 member states took part in that. This symposium today is one of the many strategies to implement these recommendations from UNESCO. We are gathered here to discuss a wide array of open science matters, including infrastructure, policy, capacity building. My wish is that we come up with milestones that will enable us, Vasilis, to open up research and digital scholarship. I will be the first to acknowledge that in some areas of Botswana we will not have connectivity. However, we endeavor that should not discourage us in trying to leverage open science. I have noted some of the topics to be discussed today. Is the status of open science, open access in Botswana, policy framework on open access, open science, and capacity building to support open science. That said, ladies and gentlemen, we should have a productive symposium. I'm told as soon as the minister leaves, we will get very busy and we'll get out of the classroom forum and get our hands dirty. I thank you all for your attention.
All right, thank you very much, Prof. Masupe, for setting the stage for us. And let me take this opportunity to recognize the presence of another very important personality in our midst, in the person of Mr. Vasilis Koulelias. I just hope I have pronounced it correctly. All right, thank you very much, sir. Now we want to invite the Minister for Education and Skills Development to give us the special address. Please, ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together and invite the Minister, please, with a standing ovation. All right, thank you.
You may take your seats. Professor Masupe knows the first thing to which I'm going to say. Let me take this time to thank you so much for standing up for me when I come to the podium. I never take that for granted, and I always thank people for that. Director of Ceremonies, Professor Vasilis, ICT Advisor to His Excellency the President, Professor Nelson Toto, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Communication, Knowledge and Technology, and former PS, the Minister of Tertiary Education, Research, Science and Technology, my brother. You know, I feel emotional because we used to spend hours and hours talking about all this what we have met for. Talk about BotsREN, NRENs, open data, open science. It's good to see you, sir. Professor Sheldon Masupe, Chief Executive Officer for BotsREN and Bitri, Mr. Omo Awiyang, Western and Central African Research Education and Network, Chief Strategist, Dr. Zabaza Kano, the UNESCO Regional Officer for Southern Africa, Professor Costas Glinos, the Open Science and Open Data Expert, senior government officials here present. I think amongst here I've seen the Director of Research, and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, Bahaitsu. I just want to clear this, that the CEO for BotsREN was saying, what time do I want to leave? I don't want to leave. I really want to be here. It's only that I have to meet the president, and I'm going to join you later online, because some of you here, I think that's why I was mentioning Prof. They know that these things are very close to my heart. And you are gathered here to try to help me do my job. My job as the Minister of Education is to impact knowledge to Botswana, and I cannot do that without you. So I don't want to leave you. It's only that I have to go. I am very honored to be here with you this morning, and I must say I'm delighted that today we are hosting scientists, researchers, scholars, policymakers, and librarians at this Open Science Symposium to discuss issues of digital digital scholarships. Today marks the first event of many sessions that will happen during the week. Open science and open data are topical issues in this digital era of changing technologies and are well aligned to our National Vision 2036, which speaks to the transformation of this knowledge from resource-based to a knowledge-based economy. The facilitation of open science and open data are important, a means to deliver the priority number 3, digitalization of His Excellency the President of the Republic of Botswana, as outlined in the Reset and Reclaim agenda to unlock productivity and deliver services to the people. It is through forums like this that will achieve the transformation that we envision. Ladies and gentlemen, those who are from Botswana have seen me running around giving Botswana students laptops. And without people like you, those will be just gadgets which could be used for TikTok and other things. So we really appreciate your gathering. We hope will give us access to that data, which we really need, because we need connectivity, we need data, we need those gadgets. We have given out those gadgets to the students, and then we need all those data for our teachers to do research. Director of Ceremonies, ladies and gentlemen, the open science movement is gaining momentum and is aimed at making changes in science and technology with respect to data sharing. This paradigm shift is becoming a game changer on how research and science will be conducted, since it is geared towards public and accessible science. Open science is a collaborative culture enabled by technology that empowers the open sharing of data, information, and knowledge within the scientific community and the wider public to accelerate public research and understanding. Science is data-driven and as such, data plays an central role in enabling, accelerating open science. Hence, it can be said that data is the new currency with untapped wealth that has great potential to be processed into something more valuable. One of the key benefits, ladies and gentlemen, of open science is the increased accessibility of knowledge. Open science facilities free access to knowledge as well as the reusage of data, thereby cutting the cost of research and reducing duplication of efforts. It also allows knowledge to be reproduced and reused to develop more science without having to start the research afresh or paying for data that's already available elsewhere. Through open science, ladies and gentlemen, the development of science and innovation is faster by reducing the delays in the transfer of knowledge and data developed by other researchers, innovators, educators, and industry. It's not only about data from others. I still remember one day when I had written a paper, and you know, the Prof will really agree with me on that. You'll have manuscript one, manuscript, final manuscript one, and then had all those manuscripts, and then I published a paper. And when I wanted to use that paper, I couldn't access it because I've lost it. It's not only about from other people. So it happened. It can even happen to all those things which we have already done. So it's important that we have access to such things, especially us from the third world or middle income countries. This also leads to a significant positive impact on the economy. When science is open, there's a cross-pollination of modern science and indigenous knowledge, enabling indigenous communities that would otherwise have difficulty accessing knowledge to exploit the indigenous knowledge more efficiently. It will also facilitate economic development, and it promotes the development of new science and innovation. Sometimes when we think of open science, most of us, we think of that we need to get some information or data from other people. We have a lot of knowledge which we want to share, our own indigenous knowledge. We can't wait to share. We can't wait to share it with the world. We can't wait to share it with the world. So that indigenous knowledge which we have, we want to share with others. So this open science and open data will give us the opportunity to share what we know with the world so that they can improve it, so that it can help the whole world. If I may allow to quote Isaac Newton, who emphasized the importance of open science as the key to better scientific research when he articulated that, open quote, if I have sinned further, it was by climbing on the shoulders of giants. This is a giant, I must quote him very well. Let me start the quote again. Open quote. If I have sinned further, it was by climbing on the shoulders of a giant. Close quote. Clearly today, in the era of the fourth industrial revolution, one cannot do good research without relying on the discoveries of previous researchers. Hence the advocacy for open science and sharing of data. You will agree with me that societal challenges such as climate change, food security, and global pandemics are demonstrating the urgency of a shift towards a cross-border and cross-disciplinary scientific collaboration and are boosting the adoption of open science practices. Through open science practices, global problems can be solved, and case studies that will be shared today demonstrate just how possible solutions are to achieve when knowledge is shared openly. How do we then systematically begin the practice of the open science? We have come a long way, ladies and gentlemen. There has been much talk about open science in different fora, locally and globally. The time is now that we must formulate an action plan to materialize the realization of this important matter before us. We already know the benefits associated with open science and open data, and I've just mentioned a few. I challenge this forum to collectively develop national and international action plans to implement and achieve this vision. It is about time that we make open accessibility mandatory for publications and research data from research funded by public grants. We must act to develop data programs that need to open science through systematic development of open policies. That speaks to you, Professor. You need you to come up with those policies, and I have trust in you, you know that. The government should work on coming up with those policies. We need to measure our progress towards achieving the open science initiative centered on three overarching dimensions. The first one being increasing the accessibility to the scientific process and the corresponding body of knowledge. The second one being making both the research and research processes and knowledge sharing more efficient. The last but not least, understanding and accessing scientific impact through innovative new metrics. Ladies and gentlemen, libraries in this regard are enablers in that they allow researchers and scholars to share, use, and reuse knowledge. Their role is to collect, preserve, curate, publish, and disseminate digital scientific materials. Libraries have been central to the development of open science from the beginning and have contributed even to policy development of open science. It is against this background on the role of libraries that I implore the challenge of all research institutions and universities to adopt an open science plan and policy, as I was advising the Prof, combining the issues of publications, data skills, and assessment. I think these are one of our unsung heroes. Let's give them, the librarians, a round of applause. UNESCO, ladies and gentlemen, open science recommendations urge member states to set up relevant legislation and national research science technology and innovation structures, bilateral, regionally, multilateral, and global initiatives for the advancement of open science. It is therefore very important that Botswana reflects on the recommendations and develops relevant supporting national policy frameworks to leverage open science. This is critical for the development of RSTI systems fit for purpose and responsive to societal needs. The national open policy framework also will also be a basis for instrumental policy instruments for universities and research institutions, and will guide digital transformation for the RSTI ecosystem. In addition, ladies and gentlemen, it will direct and support development of a national open science platform to facilitate collaboration and engagement with society and the promotion of open science principles and best practices to solve national challenges. We talked about the data, we talked about gadgets, connectivity. The National Research Science Networks, NRENs, are a proper fit as they provide the network for collaboration for open science. NRENs are a nerve center for open science in that they enable networking of institutions across borders, enabling cooperation and exchange of scientific data. With appropriate structures and policy frameworks for NRENs, open science is achievable. Vital to this network are the researchers and scholars, as they are knowledge generators and policymakers who create the enabling legal framework to make sure that open science is achievable. We must coordinate our national actions with NRENs and international initiatives to involve all scientific communities in the data transformation movement and begin to walk the open science talk to make that data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. That is being fair. All is not lost. Remember, I always say this, my duty is to push. There's DG4, where I have to give quality education to everybody without leaving anybody behind. They will also have opportunity for those who do not have to have connectivity for now, though we do not want them to live that way. Issues like e-passport, those from UNESCO will remember the e-passport, where we can collect the data, download the data, and they can have access to it in the areas where there's no network. But I believe in the village connectivity. In our country, we have this ambitious plan where we want to connect each and every, more than 500 villages with internet. Not connecting only schools, connecting the clinics, so that we could find doctors having access to other doctors online. We're also connecting our kotlas. Kotlas are places where we meet, gather, share ideas in our villages. So we want to not leave anybody behind. We want those VDCs, village development committees, PTAs, and other committees in the villages to sit around the kotla and access internet. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I know I'm addressing scientists. You don't like long speeches. I'm sorry about this. I believe that today's deliberation will set the stage for Botswana and allow us to reflect on what has been happening on the open science stage, to discuss what has been achieved and impact and challenges experienced, as well as the status of the policy development and implementation, with the ultimate aim to open avenues for improvement on policy, practice, and infrastructure. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy to be part of this. And I wholeheartedly wish you all the best, and be assured that I'll be joining you online later today. Indeed, you are here to help me do my job. God bless you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. I think what the Minister said has encapsulated a whole lot of things that LIBSENSE aims to do in various countries. I was particularly happy that the Minister recognized the various stakeholders and their voices in making open science a reality in Botswana. Can we put our hands together again for the Honorable Minister? Thank you very much, sir. Right. At this juncture, I would like to invite Prof. Masupe to take a seat here. Prof. Masupe, please put your hands together for him as he takes a seat here. And then I would like to invite Mr. Costas, Dr. Costas Glenos to also take a seat here. Yeah. All right, so at this point, we would like to hear from a man who has lived science, innovation, and technology, and is now an expert in this field. He's been sharing his knowledge across the world in on various platforms, and is so excited to share his knowledge and his experience with us here. All right, so the Honorable Minister would like to take his leave, I guess. All right, so let's be on our feet as the Honorable Minister leaves. Yeah, so yeah, I think we can even do that here quickly and then, yeah. Right. Thank you. So we'd like to take a photo with the Honorable Minister before he leaves. Hello. All right, so the show continues. Please pardon us for, it looks like there's a bit of heat here. They are working on it for us to get a very conducive atmosphere. But I think we're already enjoying ourselves, aren't we? All right, so now we want to hear from Dr. Costas Glenos. Dr. Costas Glenos, like I said before, is a science and technology policy expert. You would like to hear an expert share his experience, his decades of experience on open science, technology, and science in general. Ladies and gentlemen, can we receive Dr. Costas Glenos?
How do I make the connection to the screen?
Okay, I'll get him to do that.
Okay. So good afternoon, or good morning rather. Thank you very much for the invitation to yes, it is the screen behind me. Is the big screen or the TV screen? Yeah. Okay, maybe I can start talking and they will come on. So good morning again. Thank you very much for inviting me here to speak to you, share my experiences. Thank you to WACREN. Thank you to BotsREN. Thank you to the advisor, to the president. What my background is, I tell you a few words. I have been working in science policy for the European Commission for about 30 years, spanning areas that between fundamental research or future and emerging technologies research to industrial research and development and the digitalization of industry, to open science, and to international cooperation as well as research infrastructures. And it is in this quality of being responsible for 5 years for global research ICT infrastructures that we started the connections between Africa and Europe and the establishment within Africa in the beginning of UbuntuNet and then other networks and so on, and similar projects we held in Latin America, in Southeast Asia, in China, and all around the world. This was not just networking, not just communications, because when we say ICT infrastructures, we also mean computing infrastructures, supercomputing infrastructures, data infrastructures, as well as software and all associated parts of the novel, of the new digital science ecosystem. Okay, so, but here I come to talk to you about open science. Sorry? He's bringing another cable. Okay, so here my topic is open science. And the first point I would like to make, by the way, the minister's speech was excellent. So, I mean, he covered many of the topics that I intend to cover. Actually, there are very few topics that we'll cover in addition, but I'll say what he said, probably a little bit more detail with some words on the screen so that it can stay in the mind. So, where does it all start? It all starts from the fact that science is in transition. And it's in transition because it becomes more collaborative, more global, and more digital. I don't need to argue to convince you of any of the three, but the digital part is completely underestimated. You know, I did my PhD in the 80s. And if I go into the academic environment today, I recognize everything. Yes, there is computers and so on, but I know how it works. Somebody from the advertising industry and marketing, somebody from media, from so many areas of the economy, if they just sleep for 30 years and they go back to their sector 30 years later, they cannot recognize anything. It's completely transformed by digital. Science, not yet. Science, we're at the beginning. And why are we still at the beginning? Why are we going so slow in science? Because science is not governed by market forces, right? I mean, for the most part of it, at least, is not governed by market forces. There's the competition of the type that if you don't do it, you go out of business. So science is being transformed, albeit slowly till now. There are vested interests that prevent it from being transformed more quickly. Are there? Not yet. There are vested interests that prevent it from being transformed more quickly. There is an excellent book for anyone who wants to understand the transformation, already more than 10 years old, that is called Reinventing Discovery. It describes how the scientific process, the whole process for inventing things, for finding knowledge, will be completely changed due to many factors, but largely digitalization. So that's why ICT is a very important part of it. Now, in Europe, for instance, where a lot of my experience is, but I also know quite well the United States, yes, we had an advanced science system, but the more advanced you are, the harder it is to make the transition, because things are entrenched, including in culture. And countries that start today or have started recently developing their science policy have the opportunity to leapfrog. They don't need to go through the same process that somebody went in wherever, in the US or in Europe or in China or wherever. If you do it right from the beginning, you leapfrog. You get the full benefit without going through the hurdles. So that was the first slide. I have to remember where the second slide was. Yeah, another thing I want to say is that an additional reason to support science is because we live politically and worldwide in an era of populisms, of who have the truths and the post-truths, right? I mean, we are familiar with that. In many communities, especially in social media, what matters is not what it really is, it matters what you believe. If you believe in something, you're right, right? Which is the opposite of science. Science, what is it? It's the organized pursuit of truth based on evidence. This is basically what science and technology are. So it's the exact opposite. But in order for this mentality, for this approach to prevail, you need trust in science. And science that's closed, science that one day says black and a week later says white, science that is discovered to be corrupt, or scientists that discovered to be corrupt, destroys the trust in science, and we see many phenomena like this. I'm not talking about Africa or Botswana in particular, but I'm talking about also Europe and the US. We managed? Not. No. Almost. Okay, so what are the challenges for science today? We say, and here, these are the challenges globally, but, and when I say globally, I mean including in the most advanced, scientifically advanced countries. There are big challenges. Things are not doing so well. First big issue is that we have in science very narrow perceptions of quality. So what is quality in science? Quality is when you publish. And when you publish, and you get a lot of citations, and especially if you publish in a high impact, so-called high GIF journal, right? That's what quality is. That's how quality is measured. But this is very narrow. This creates all kinds of problems because it provides the wrong incentives. So first of all, you have hyper-publishing and hyper-authorship. The number of publications are exploding, so they grow exponentially. We know that 30 to 40% of the publications are never read by anybody, except by their authors, of course. Yeah? And many of the others have, because it matters so much to publish that you just publish no matter what. Secondly, you have a proliferation of reviewing. Reviewing is extremely problematic today. You don't find the reviewers to review the papers. The whole trust in science is based on the fact that knowledge is peer-reviewed. But you don't find the reviewers, and the reviewers do not spend sufficient time. And a very small minority of reviewers do the majority of reviews, and the most senior people typically do not do reviews. Or if they do, they give it to their graduate students to do, and then they put their name underneath. Then we have, today's system, loss of control of our scientific production. You are a country, Botswana, for example, you fund your research system, your universities, research centers, whatever. Something comes out. What comes out and matters for the people that work there is publications, unfortunately, mostly. Not impact these publications have, not engagement with society, not many other things that I explain in a second. What matters is this, and this, whom does it belong to? The copyright, the intellectual property rights, whom do they belong to? To the publishers. Most of it belongs to the publishers that have not spent a penny for doing the research, right? This is the system of science in the last 30 or 40 years. Then you have a disaster regarding innovation. Very marginal innovation coming out today. Why? but because if you are a postdoc, for instance, you are 28 years old, for example, and you start a postdoc, will you start a subject that is risky? Because innovation means taking risk. Will you start a subject that is risky? No, you're not going to start a subject that is risky, because if you don't get 2 papers at least out of your postdoc, it means you don't have a career. And if you don't have a career, it's a disaster, right? So you will choose an area where you know something will come out. In other words, a very low risk area, where you will continue something that somebody did. It came up. I lost my cursor. Okay. Yeah, so you'll choose something that it is low risk, but that you know something will come out, because you don't take the risk of spending a year, 2 years in research and no papers coming out. We have a fight for funding. That's terrible. There are many senior scientists that spend 40% of their time trying to find funds, and they're rewarded for that. So if you bring money, lots of money to the university, which is important, of course, it matters a lot. What you did with this money at the end of the project matters far, far, far less. So, but that's the system of science today. There's an obsession with rankings. We know they don't represent anything, or not representing much. I don't want to be extreme. You know what happened with the University of Columbia in last month, that it went 15 places down in the international rankings because it was discovered that they cooked the numbers. And then after that, a lot of discussion took place. It was discovered that everybody cooks the numbers, because any indicator you have, and if it's very important for you, if it's important for you to get the best students, yeah, you'll do your best to cook it, right? To influence it. So what do we have there? We have the wrong incentives. The result is what? The worst of all is this: lack of reproducibility and replicability in research. We have in the health area up to 85% of research results that are worthless. Up to 85%. We have studied this since 2015. The journal Nature published a series of articles, about a dozen articles about this. They are worthless. Why? Because if you try to reproduce the results, to use the same data with the same software, you come up with a different conclusion of what the paper says. Now, there are many reasons for this, and I'm not going to expand, it's an entire talk, but it is because we have the wrong incentives. The incentive is not to do rigorous research. The incentive is to publish, but just publish. Yeah? And preferably in Cell, Nature, Science, and many of these other very high prestige journals. So this way we're wasting our data resources. Very often we repeat twice, 3 times, 4 times research that's proven not to work, because people don't know, because it's not open, it's not published, the data. And then it goes on, and I could give another talk about the lack of equity and inclusion, for instance, or how to game the system. So is this what we want? And this, I describe now Europe. I describe Europe and the most advanced countries, but largely because the system is global, is valid everywhere. Is it what we want? So the root obstacle to change, it's culture. Because we are used, those of us that have grown into the science system for many years, we are used to pay more attention to papers rather than to impacts. We are used into looking at the outputs of the process and not the process itself, how you do your research. Do you do it with integrity? Are you someone who is sharing with their colleagues? Do you pay attention to the needs of your local environment, of the city, for example, where your university is, and so on and so forth? And at the end of the day, what we need is assuming responsibility. So it is, you are responsible as a scientist, you should feel responsible, not only for what you bring in and you publish, but what comes out. So at the root of this all is the rewards and incentive system for scientists. What are you proud of as a scientist? what should happen for you to become proud as a professor or as a scientist, and the enabling infrastructure. So you need these two things, the right incentives, which do not exist today, who have their own incentives, and the right infrastructure, which partly exists and partly is in development, and this is very location dependent. So we need to go from the current system where excellence is defined largely on the basis of where scientists publish. When I say scientists, by the way, I don't mean only physicists and chemists. I mean, it's a term very broad. It includes economists, includes engineers, includes social sciences and humanities, includes everything. So from a system that excellence is defined where you publish, to a system that you have a more composite definition of excellence, a system that incentivizes researchers to produce specific outputs and to publish as much and as fast as possible, to a system that incentivizes researchers also to share knowledge early and openly. If you have an open science plan in Botswana, and it's excellent like a plan, but there is no incentive for the person, for the professor, for the researcher to behave according to the plan, then it will make a difference, but a small difference. If you don't correct the incentives and rewards issue, then this is the big discovery we have done in Europe and in the last 2 years, that we're going slow. Open access is still 50%, despite so much money invested, despite all the efforts. Why? Because what matters for a scientist is to publish in the best journal, what is considered the best journal, which is not objective, what is the reputation. The journal has the best reputation, and if it's closed access, okay, it's closed access. This is what matters for my career. Why should I comply with the national plan that says, no, I should publish open access? So this we have to correct, and rewarding, we have to go from a system that rewards individual competing scientists and gaining scientific prestige, something that rewards also teamwork. Everybody speaks about collaboration. I did in the beginning. But who rewards collaboration? What do you gain if you're a scientist that collaborates really and openly? There are no incentives for it. So open science is part of this answer. This is what the minister said exactly this morning, what he defined open science. It was very consistent, and also he talked about the benefits, which is also very similar to what's there. He talked a bit about COVID-19 as something positive for open science, or rather the opposite, that open science has made a positive impact on our search for medicines and vaccines in the COVID and respond to the crisis. It is true, and the opposite is also true. So it's a mixed picture. So with COVID-19, what did we see? We saw a huge increase in preprints, right? I mean, actually, didn't start because of COVID-19. It goes almost exponentially. Since the beginning of the 90s, we have now about 250,000 papers published in preprint centers, and it is proven that if you do preprints, then you have something like 4-5 times more citations later on, that you have more chances to be accepted as a printed version, and you are read by a far wider community, not to mention that when you do a preprint, they read you immediately. So days, right after you publish. Within the second day starts the readership. With the publication, the average time is 1.5 years. So people who read about what you did 1.5 years later. For many areas of science, this is extremely slow, and for COVID-19, this was, of course, unacceptable. We couldn't wait for papers to be published 1.5 years later in order to do the scientific work. So that was very good. What was very good also is that private publishers bowed to the pressure of the ministers and of the chief science advisors of many countries, and opened up temporarily all their journals where they relate to COVID-19, to the pandemic. But, big but, if you do a study, I mean, Wellcome Trust did such a study, to see in the COVID-19 papers how many of them not having their data as part of the paper, but have a data availability statement. And the result is, for me at least, shocking. The percentage is less than the average paper. So COVID-19 did not result in more data being open, as the steady state, the average science. So the data supporting the papers remained, for the most part, closed. Why? Because there are counter incentives, and I have talked personally to many scientists, in France, for instance, in several countries. There are counter incentives. So you say, I want to keep the data for myself because if I give it out, others will find something and maybe I won't find anything. And why did the effort of, so there's no incentive of sharing the data. Some data were open, of course, but I'm saying that this sum is the average. It's not, the COVID-19 did not contribute to having more data open. And then even if they are open, the data, very difficult, very, very difficult to use them. Because to make a real impact, you need to combine data. You need to combine data that are genomic, for example, with the data that are from hospitals, with data that are epidemiological from the national statistical authorities, and you need to combine, and many other social data, social behavioral data. And this is almost impossible. It's impossible for technical reasons because we don't have the right, we're working on this, but we don't have the right data formats to be able to combine them, but also because these are different worlds governed by different ministries. And for example, national health data, it is now this has started thanks to COVID-19, but has been extremely difficult to combine them with hospital data. In some countries, the data never get out of the hospital. Now we have developed software and systems that go calculate where the data is in the hospital and come back, so that you don't have to export the data from the hospital. Some other countries have national repositories for such data, but they are not allowed to go out of the country. So we have to have national data hubs. And I don't know if anybody here has been dealing with these issues, but if not, if yes, we have a lot of experience to share, and we have the European COVID-19 data platform, which is actually a global platform, have data from all over the world. That's completely open with huge efforts on interoperability. And what normally happens in 10 or 15 years happened in just 2 years because of the pressure from COVID. So I'll give you now two things briefly, one about publishing and one about data, because publishing is part of the problem and needs to change. So today we have, you see the numbers, more than 120,000 journals, right? Huge number, but only 10 publishers publish half of the articles, basically. And these 10 are mostly, all of them, I think, they are private publishers. It's a big industry, so they have an extremely fierce lobby, 28 billion expected revenues next year. Libraries' budget is shrinking because of digitalization. Most of this publishing goes on only digital, 90%. And as I was saying earlier, more than half globally of the papers are behind paywalls. You cannot read them. And we're not making progress. We're making progress like 1% every year. If we go like this, in 30 years, still we'll have a significant percentage that is not open access. Part of the open access industry, so APC means article processing charges, what you pay to a publisher in order for them to publish your paper open access. There are several publishers like this. This grows quickly, but creates a big problem of cost. So, and countries, especially developing countries, cannot afford this cost. They cannot afford to pay. You can, the story with Nature is famous because it asks 10,000 euros, more or less, to publish a paper open access, right? Who has 10,000 euros? Some people have, but few, very few. So that's a big problem. I put you a lot of references if you want to look this up. Because I think these are the best areas where you can get the data. So what's the problem? We need open access. We need to retain copyright. This is a scandal for me, huge scandal, that the state pays for your salary, that you produce something after years of work, and then who has the copyright is somebody else who did nothing in research. The only thing is that they accepted to publish your paper. And then you pay to get it back, you pay to read it. I mean, it's you think about it, it's an amazing system. The system is too slow today. You know how it happens. If you are a good researcher, there is a cascade of 8 levels of quote unquote, because it's really quote unquote, it's not really quality. So you try the best journal first. If your paper is rejected, because these journals have, 1 in 20 acceptance rate, you go to the next, and the next, and the next. And you spend 2 or 3 years submitting and resubmitting your paper and so on. So it's a slow and wasteful system. There is lack of transparency. You don't see why a paper was rejected, and very often the paper is rejected, most often in the best journals, best quote unquote, without peer review, just decision of the editor, the editorial board. If it's something that the readership of that journal think it's not so attractive, then they won't publish it even without peer reviewing it. And it is this publish or perish culture that it cultivates, the tyranny of the journal impact factor, that is not sustainable anymore, the lack of reproducibility. Actually, there have been articles that the higher the reputation of the journal, the more retractions of papers. Can you think about it? The higher the reputation, the more papers are retracted from the journal. Okay, there can be logical explanations to this, but it shows that these things are not, we shouldn't take them on face value. Innovations are explained too risky, and then cost is exploding. So this is one, and I'm not gonna, I'm speaking too much probably, and I'm not gonna explain it, but one of the solutions, a very important solution, is besides, trying more open access and so on, is, and this is the responsibility of countries and institutions, is to invest in institutional publishing. So in publishing that's non-for-profit, it's like the infrastructure. It is an infrastructure. Publishing should be seen as an infrastructure. So the same logic that you have BotsREN providing free bandwidth to universities because they do their best to get the best price for the service. The same logic, which applies also to computing, it applies also to publishing. Publishing should be an infrastructure, and it is for the institutions and or the national authorities to ensure it. And there are many, Latin America is an excellent example, because Latin America has already gone that way for quite a few years now. You see here they call this in the jargon diamond open access, which means institutional publishing, that you don't pay anything, it's free. You send your paper, it's published. And peer reviewed, of course, and so on. So you see that this is Latin American papers with co-authors from other countries. And you see how it's prevalent in Latin America, in South America, and in Mexico and Central America. Spain also, because they have very close links. Portugal as well, but less so. A little bit elsewhere, less so. This is something that we should build on, and it can be a very good model that solves many of the issues. There are many initiatives in Europe, but in Europe we have, as I said earlier, entrenched interest, vested interest, very strong. So it will be progress, but slow. Yeah? In Africa and Botswana, you can do much better, much better than this. And then I have put a lot of links here if you want to look them up. And this is an example of what we do in Europe. This is an initiative of the European Commission where they launched a publishing platform. According to the model, that's very interesting, and it becomes more and more. You see more and more platforms like this, journals like this. It's a post-publication peer review model. So it combines the preprint with the peer review. So you first publish, after, of course, many checks to ensure there is no plagiarism, there is no many things, but you first publish, and then you peer review, and the peer reviews are open. Anybody can read them. The quality increases dramatically, because if you're a peer reviewer and you know what you say, the criticism on the paper will be published, You take it seriously. You don't write 2 lines and you say a good paper, for example, or whatever. Again, if this is something that something that is expanding, there is a vision now beyond next year where the European contract will end with a service provider. It's F1000. It's a company in the UK who is the service provider. They are looking at making this a pan-European publishing service. So anybody in Europe to be able to publish in this platform. And it's already indexed in the Scopus and in the other indexing. So this was about publishing, because we don't talk about it very often. And here I take the opportunity to say one thing to inform you of the existence of this, which is the Open Climate Campaign. It's a bit similar to the COVID-19 campaign. You know, COVID-19 campaign, people campaigned for the publishers to open their papers. So, and many people say, come on, I mean, biodiversity and climate, it's even a bigger emergency than COVID. Why don't they open it? So started the campaign. I'm in the steering board of this campaign, so advising them basically. So I would like to let you know about it. Only 43% of climate-related and biodiversity-related papers are open. It is, I think, really imperative that everything is open. The consortium, which is Creative Commons, Spark, and EIFL, and you may be familiar with all 3 of them. With EIFL, I'm sure you're familiar. They have undertaken this project with a number of actions, including they work with national governments, and you could be one of them, to develop open access policy and enable the open sharing of climate change. Of course, we want everything open access, but this is urgent. Climate change is urgent. Finished with publishing, I have one slide about the European research data to show you also that in Europe, things are not so rosy. So the European Commission undertook a study last year, but the main part of the work was done this year. 40 countries, 15,000 researchers, statistical sample, to find out what's going on with data. I mean, we don't know, right? It is very difficult to find out if you don't do this kind of huge study. So volumes are exabytes. This was expected. Storage. In fact, 60% of researchers have never stored anything in a repository. They just keep it on their laptops or their personal computer. 60%. And from the rest, 22% only use consistently a repository where it can be shared with others, right? Then the size of repositories, most of them is only 8% is more than 1 petabyte. Yeah, so we don't need all these repositories, but fine. We have a system, an infrastructure called EOSC that will make it transparent which repository you are. So you go into the system and you find the data wherever they are. So this is okay, this is fine. But then second big problem, FAIR. FAIR is findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable data, right? Because if it's not findable, why do you care? I mean, it's like it doesn't exist. Same thing about accessible. If you know it exists, but you cannot access it, then again. Same thing about R, reusable. If you can access it, if you can find it, and then access it, but you cannot reuse it, either because of intellectual property issues, or because it's not annotated adequately, it doesn't give you trust that can be reused, it does not give you insufficient metadata information on where it came from, and so on and so forth, then also it's useless. And so what happens with these FAIR principles? Only 1 in 3 researchers are really familiar, and only 1 out of 5 put them in practice in Europe. 40 countries, broader Europe. So lots of work to do in data, and this shows also that in Botswana and in many other countries, in developing or middling up countries, you can avoid, you can knowing these issues, because we didn't know them. We didn't know them. Knowing these issues, you can plan the system upfront correctly. And of course here, what's the problem? Incentives and rewards, of course. Because, you know, annotating your data so that somebody can use them takes time. It's not like, but why should you spend your time if it is not assessed by the university, if it does not take place in your career evaluation report, if you are not rewarded for it in any way, why should you spend your time on this? I mean, some people do, and it is to their honor that they do. But we cannot rely a science system on how conscientious someone is. Not to mention the issues of data stewards. So, I have 2 slides on what national governments and national authorities can do, and one other on what institutions could do. So, there are 2 things always. One is the practice, and one is the enabling factors that you should do. You have to improve the practice of research and innovation. Okay, all this you know, I think. So, open access, as I argued earlier, you need new publishing models to introduce them slowly but safely. You need to ensure that all research outputs are shared as soon as possible. That's why it says here, by mandates and evaluation. What does it mean by mandates? Mandates means it's written in your contract that you need to make things open. Not that the national policies that they are open, it's written in your contract. In your if you get funding, if you are employed, if you are whatever. This is mandates or evaluation, that when you are assessed and going from, you know, assistant professor to associate professor, for example, is what have you made open? That this is one of the criteria. We now have started in Europe, I mean, maybe a year ago, and this becomes, I mean, within 5-10 years, this will be mainstream. It is shocking in the beginning. Eh? Some people say, oh, come on. But this is how you do it. So, early sharing, all data fair, with research data management. This is an important part. NRNs can have a very important role to play in research data management because this is a service you need to provide the researchers. Researchers are not all of them computer scientists that know how to manage their data and so on. A lot of emphasis to the quality of research, like reproducible results. Expand the notions of integrity. Integrity is not somebody who will steal data and plagiarize so on. Not only this, but in the future, somebody who is not sharing, who is keeping to himself everything or to herself, this will not be considered behavior with integrity. And encourage societal engagement and responsibility. This is a whole topic. I don't have the time to expand. But for all this to happen, you need the enablers. Nothing of this will happen. And this is a very important part of the governments. So I have already argued about this, right? You have to change, you have to reform the system of assessment of projects, people, and institutions. Then you need to provide the services to the researchers. You need connectivity, you need computing, you need data, and so on and so forth. And you need to provide the skills. Then something that we'll not talk about today is you need, and it's very concrete, you need to improve, it depends on the country, the legal and regulatory environment for data and copyright. So if your national laws do not allow copyright of material that came out of public funding to be made a gift to somebody else, the country keeps it, then problem solved, right? Some countries have it. France has it now, but several countries start putting this in their national system. And there are many other aspects with this. Again, if you're interested, we can talk later on in more detail about it. And develop the open research infrastructures, including networking, including for data, computing, and I think we'll start considering publications more and more, publishing more and more of an infrastructure. So all of this, you can have concrete plans to achieve them. The key thing is that if you do this without that, waste of time. If you do one of these without the others, You achieve still something. It's not that it's a complete waste of time, but they are completely synergetic. If you do all four, then you get maximum impact. So, and then remember, when money and budget comes, it's not about financing only the work of research, but it's about financing also an efficient research system, and you need this for an efficient research system. Okay, I don't talk about this. And then what can universities do on their side? So it's largely similar, right? I mean, we have universities that already forbid closed access publications. The pioneer is University of Liège in Belgium, which 20 years ago, it said that any paper published closed access will not count for the promotion of university. Paper published closed access will not count for the promotion of university. For the promotion of a staff of the university. Closed access. Finished. Right. All the, I mean, from next year, nobody published closed access. University policy, you put it in very simple, very simple. It's a university policy, you put it in place. I don't say you have to do this, but you have to think what you do about it. I don't say you have to do this, but you have to think what you do about many of the things. Early sharing of all research outputs, so I don't repeat many of the things because similar. Why they are similar? Universities because can also mandate things from the universities can also mandate things from their staff. It can be again in their employment contract, or can be in their assessment system. And then it's also the university legal responsibility, because you see, I don't have the responsibility, legal providing here because this is not university responsibility, but providing data stewards adequate digital skills and provide data stewards at least one. So each university needs, now it depends on the size, at least one. So people who usually now you have 3, 4, 5. So people who, it's like the previous librarians, right, that offer a service to everybody in the university. So you need a data steward, somebody who understands about data, and that helps anybody that needs specialized skills in research data management. Otherwise, it doesn't work. I mean, the average researcher is not going to become a computer scientist, for example, in order to do their data. It needs the help of a professional. Can be at the institutional level, can be at the country level in a small country also, or it can be, and finally, and I said this, you have to reform the evaluation of academics and research staff to reward conduct. You have to reform the evaluation of academics and research staff to reward conduct, not only outputs, not only publications, but also conduct and local impact, not just publications. So my main messages were that the research system and the process are changing. Who master this transition, this will accelerate, and those who master this transition directly to a new system, or will see leapfrog benefits directly to a new system, will see enormous benefits. Because the current system is so inefficient. And in the trust, so we'll see enormous benefits in impact, in efficiency, in the trust of people to the system. But to reap these benefits, countries and institutions need to modernize the way how knowledge is evaluated and assessed, how knowledge is codified and shared and disseminated, as well as provide the skills that are needed for that, and as well as the infrastructure and the services, and in many cases update their legal and regulatory framework. So what do we need? Science plan, or what do you need? Open science plan. A national science plan. It's about really the efficiency open science plan, but it goes beyond open science. It's about really the efficiency of the whole science system. So a national open science plan, and you have to be, but that's concrete. It's objectives. And you have to be picky. You cannot, have 100 objectives and accomplish none. Down to tasks, so with owner of each objectives held responsible. Broken down to tasks with owner of each task held responsible. And we need to develop this according to a specific timetable. And then, of course, all this we need to develop this. Be funded. Because if you have an excellent science plan, all this needs to be funded. No funding. Because if you have an excellent science plan that supports, but then no funding for the infrastructure that supports it. Or no funding for the actual research to be done. But there is not much benefit that will you have an excellent plan, but there is not much benefit that will come out of it. I think that must have been the last one. Yes, thank you very much.
Right, so if you have any question, if you have any question,
be available to respond to your
Dr.
questions.
Glenos,
I know that
be available to respond to your questions. I know that we're a bit belated with the breakfast.
Is open now.
So, but still, if you have any question, please.
When we
The
return,
floor is open now.
there's a
then-
question there.
Or
Please,
when we
can you send a
return,
microphone to
there's a
Can you
question
get
there.
a microphone, please?
Please, can you send a microphone? Can you get a microphone, please?
Thank you for a very interesting presentation. I'm Frank. Thank you for a very interesting presentation. I'm Frank Dule from Tanzania. On issues of open access. I've also been following up on issues of open access. Among the issues, but I want to share with you on among the issues on scholar communication and open access in particular, which I thought you should also point out is the rise of open access publishers. So they're interfering a lot with we call them predatory publishers. So they're interfering a lot with as a matter of fact with open access. Some institutions and as a matter of fact don't encourage their some institutions don't encourage their journals which charge researchers to publish in journals which charge. For them they think every journal which charges APCs is predatory. For them they think every journal which charges is predatory.
That was the,
So I wanted you to show. But
away.
also
Yes.
maybe before
that
you
was
proceed.
the, no, I should not have taken
But
it away.
also maybe before you proceed. But also I wanted to publishing the diamond maybe publishing tell is us coming up. Maybe you should also between tell us the distinction between road and golden green road. Road and compared to green road publish. Thank you. As compared to diamond publish. Thank you.
So on the first point, yes, so on the first point, this is exactly what I meant. Yes, this I fully agree with you, and this is exactly what I meant, and I said, but briefly, exclamation with the bullet that was saying cost, exclamation mark, that the open access publishing with article processing costs with APCs, as an extreme example, and they brought the example of nature as an extreme example, charging an arm and a leg to publish a paper. But and they said that it is not affordable. So this is one of the key issues. But not the other issues that are the predatory publishers, but not all publishers that are open access with APCs are predatory. So some of them are, some of them are not. Generally, there is the directory of open access journals, DOAJ, is listed there. And if a publisher is listed there, normally there are some checks that have been done, and this is not supposed to be a predatory publisher. But of course, predatory publishers will still the possibility to publish exist because they offer you the possibility to publish. So you can still put in your CV a publication, and then nobody is going, not nobody, but very few people will go and look at where you published and what publisher this is and so on to see if this is a predatory. So there will still be people that are willing to pay in order to increase the number of publications in the CV, let's say. But it is a problem. We need to be clear that which publishers are of sufficient quality and which are predatory publishers. That's clear. But DOAJ does this already, at least to some extent. But still, even if we did this, we still have the issue of cost. That it is in parts of the world, at least, it's very expensive. And this is what institutional publishing can do. In Latin America, you get down the cost of publishing an article to 6 to 7 euros per article, which is amazing because normally it's considered as low as this, which is amazing because normally it's considered. I mean, there is an agreement that probably between 1,000 and 2,000 per article is a fair cost in a traditional. You can the bare bones cost can be, but you can the bare bones cost can be depends on the country, but can be very very little. Your second point. Your second point. So if you can achieve green. I mean, the aim is open access. So if you can achieve open access by green, then fine. But conditions that publishers put very often the conditions that publishers put only is that the paper will become open only after 6, 12, or 18 months. That's not good. Depends. We are talking about immediate. So open access. That's not good. I mean, science. We are talking about immediate open access. Science and technology, they go very quickly today. If I tell you that yes, I give you my period to publish, it will be open access a year later. Better than never. But I mean, okay, it's still useful. Of course, better than never. But I want it to be open now. And our policy is that you should have, I think everybody, is that it's open now. And this is also the policy of the US. You know, the US that was quite reluctant. They thought during the several presidencies under Trump and under Biden and so on, when was it? It was 2 doesn't go all the way that they published their open access. It doesn't go all the way. I'm not fully happy, let's say, but it goes a long way, and it is immediate open access. Good, immediate. But in green, so green, yeah, if you can do it, it's good. Very often, actually, but in green, sometimes it's not immediate, or very often actually it's immediate. And secondly, green brings the researcher, he or she becomes on the spot. Between the funder, he or she becomes the intermediary between the funder or the government and the publisher, because the government tells him open access. And the publisher tells him, no, sorry, no open access. So that's the. And then what does he do? That's some of the problems with green. But to the extent that you can do it, yes, it's very good.
Thank you. My name is Duelon Tota from Botswana International University of Science and Technology. My name is Duelon Tota from Botswana International University of Science and Technology. Thank you for the presentation, even though I joined it very late. My first question is, which publishers that they have adopted the Diamond Open Access model? The second question is, yes, that 60% from your presentation you indicated that 60% of the research output or the data set is within our researchers' laptop. And you recommended that it should be mandatory that they should deposit that kind of publication or the intellectual output. My question is, maybe you can share us with the strategies that we can convince our management, more especially the executive management of the institution, like a university management. I believe all of us here, the information professionals, we understand that they should deposit those outputs, but we are having the challenge to come to make them to upload or to share their findings. The issue is the processes or the policies within our institution. Maybe you can share us with strategy or experiences that you can share with us that we can adopt here in Botswana. Thank you.
Should be done in the context if there is absolutely, I fully agree, and this should be done in the context if there is a development of a science, national science plan. It should be done in that context. A whole section of this should be devoted to data management. There is a lot of experience with it. There are also courses that was organized by Science Europe. I spoke to a course on this that was organized by Science Europe, which is an association of funders, of about 40 or 50 national funders. Private funders, another one. Private funders, yeah, national funders mostly. Private funders, another one. Private funders taking interest in this to have also been liaising with them. So yes, there's a lot of material. I cannot reply you now because it's half an hour. It's there's a lot of substance to your question. It's not like, but clearly you need the infrastructure, the technical infrastructure, the repository or whatever. Or many cases, global repositories or community repositories exist. So, for example, in archive in physics, you deposit an archive wherever you are. You don't need to be. It started in Los Alamos, national laboratory, but it's global. But you need anyway the repository. If you are to deposit in Los Alamos, then you need, of course, a good communication link. It depends on the size of the data, which is where BotsREN, one of the areas where BotsREN comes in. The digital. Then you need the repository. You need the digital assistants. The stewards, some people call them, the digital assistants, the people with skills in data, at least one person in the university, as I said earlier, to be there in order to help you as a researcher. As I said earlier, so not everybody is an IT professional. The policy of the university. So you need the stewards, then you need the policy of the university. And the policy of the university that provides also the incentives for you to do the work. Because again, as I said earlier, it's laborious. So if you have a data set and it's only for you to use,
you don't write everything down.
You know what you did,
For somebody else
or
to
you think
use,
you know. You need to write
you
everything
don't write
down.
everything
You need
down.
to annotate.
And
But
the
if for
data set
somebody
in
else to
detail.
use,
All the
you need to write
conditions
everything
under
down. You
which
need to
the data
annotate
would
the
gather
data
the
set
fo-
in
so on and
detail.
so forth.
All the conditions
yes,
under
there are
which the
different
data would
parts of
gather,
it,
so
and
on and so
research
forth.
data management becomes a
So
very
yes, there are
important,
different parts of it, and
sub-discipline.
research data management becomes a very
RDM,
important
that was in one of my slides.
sub-discipline.
The,
I mean, RDM, that was in one of my slides.
The PS had a question.
The PS had a question, I think, earlier.
It was an issue of redirecting the question to the practitioners on the redirecting the question to the
I think generally
practitioners
speaking we've
on the
always
right,
had a
in the sense
trend
that
where the
you know,
interest for
I think
publication
generally
is,
speaking we've always had a
from
trend
south to
where
north,
the interest
if
for
I can use it that
publication
way.
is
and of course like you were saying
from
earlier
south
on
to
that,
north, if I
there's an
can use it
opportunity
that
for
way.
one to be able
And of course, like you were saying
to
earlier on, that
quickly get
there's an
started
opportunity
because
for
of the fact
one
that
to
things
be
have
able
been done,
to,
etc., etc.
to quickly
And I'm thinking
get
that,
started because of the fact that
that
things
of
have
course
been
there's
done,
a
etc.
desire for
etc.
everyone to publish in
And I'm
sterling
thinking
English
that
and everything else.
that of
But I
course
was
there's a
just
desire for
wondering
everyone to
whether this
publish
is
in
not
sterling
the right
English and everything
opportunity
else.
for
But I was
Africa,
just
for
wondering
regions,
whether
for
this is
SADC,
not
for
the
whatever,
right opportunity
to really,
for Africa,
redirect
for
that
regions, for
internally in
SADC,
terms
for
of
whatever,
publication focus.
to really,
Because sometimes I feel
redirect
that,
that
the
internally
issue
in
of
terms of the
impact of the
publication
journal,
focus.
It's a
Because
perception.
sometimes I feel that
Because
the
if you
issue
have
of impact of the journal,
old people
it's a
in
perception.
Botswana who are
Because if
good
you
in
have
the
got,
language, and
you
you
know,
have the
old people
same
in
group
Botswana
in
who
France,
are,
in
good in the
Japan and
language,
whatever.
and you have got
Those
this
people are
same
experts in
group
the
in
language.
France
So they could
and
be the
in
ones
Japan
that
and
have
whatever.
the nature
Those
level
people are
of
experts in the
expertise.
language,
So
so they could
quality
be the
is
ones that
everywhere.
have got the
So
nature
on that basis,
level of
one assumes
expertise.
that,
So
maybe
quality
this is
is
the right
everywhere.
opportunity now for,
So on that basis,
people to
one
really,
assumes that
redirect
maybe
the
this is
focus
the right opportunity
so
now
that,
for people
like
to
what you were
really
saying earlier on, that,
redirect the focus,
evaluation, the
so that
criteria for
like what you were saying earlier on, that
should really be
the
based
evaluation,
upon
the
the
criteria
relevance of
for
the local
assessing the
situation.
researchers
because at the
should
moment
really be
we are
based
driven by
upon the
impact
relevance
fact.
of
I
the
mean, who
local
cares about it?
situation.
Okay, I did care when
Because
I
at the
was
moment
young.
we are driven by
But
the
I'm old, I
impact
don't
fact.
care
I mean,
about
who
it
cares
anymore
about
because
it? Okay, I
sometimes
did
you
care
tend
when
to
I
feel
was
that
young.
the relevance
But I'm
has
old,
got
I don't
nothing
care
to do
about it anymore because
with the
sometimes
local
you tend to
situation.
feel that
You're
the
trying to pretend
relevance
that you're in
has got nothing to
Luxembourg
do
and
with
wherever,
the
whereas
local
for
situation.
here,
You're trying to pretend that you're in
some
Luxembourg and
things that
wherever,
might not
whereas
seem to be so
for
important
here,
for others, they're
you know,
important here.
some
So you
things
tend to
that might not
negate your
seem to be
space
so
simply because you
important
want
for
to have a
others,
high
they're
impact.
important here. So you tend to negate your space simply because you want to have a high impact factor.
Absolutely. That was exactly one of my points.
Environment, what
I
impact you can have
fully agree with you. The local conditions, the local environment, what impact you can have locally,
on the other hand, of course,
should be a significant
advance
factor.
in any area.
On the other hand, of course,
with the best in that area.
in order
And
to
the best
advance in
that
any area, it's good to cooperate with the best in that area. And the best in that area may not be in Botswana or may not be in, I don't know, wherever. You find them wherever they are. So science is global.
But in principle,
okay, with some limitations depending on some countries and so on, but in principle, because knowledge is global.
But what are your priorities?
And if something is true, some words are true in other places as well. But what your priorities are and where you want to give your emphasis are different. And the impact you have is very often local, I don't know, in the context or international context. So I think clearly, I don't know, in the context of in the national context or in the SADC context or in cooperation with Latin America or in cooperation with Europe, because there are several initiatives now for this institutional publishing. Work with these
I think
institutions. Botswana should absolutely work with these
Thank you so much for the very useful
institutions.
presentation. I'm Angelica Sotori-Conte. I work for the European Commission. Thank you so much for the very useful presentation. I'm Angelica Sotori-Conte. I work for the European Commission, and I'm particularly coming from the DG in charge of the international partnerships, dealing with the Europe-Africa relations. So I understand that open science is a really big movement that requires a lot of effort. And before you mentioned the role of regional and national research and education communities, so I was wondering whether if you could expand a bit on what these communities and what these networks could do to help and support the movement overall, and also what are the limits, where does their support maybe stop and where further assistance would be needed.
Education communities.
all my speech was about
national research and education communities. All my speech was about the national research and education communities. So if we mean the people, and you have people. In a community there you have institutions and you have people.
The NRENs.
Right? Yeah, the NRNs. Oh, the NRNs. The NRNs.
The sky is the limit, because
Yeah, the
depends,
NRNs.
what
Oh, the
role you
NRNs.
give them. The
the,
sky is the limit,
NRN
because it depends what role you give them.
The NRN started, as you know, 30 years ago, by providing bandwidth, connectivity. More and more things. But then, as technology advanced, they expanded to more and more things. And already from the year 2000 or so, in some countries, for instance, the NRNs managed the entire national network, like in France, or like in the grades of the pupils connected all schools, even in the elementary schools. Even the grades of the pupils are on the NRN in Denmark. One area they have expanded, but not in all countries. In France, in several countries. It is this. So one area they have expanded, but not in all countries. It depends on national policy. It is this, to be the national network for everything related to education research, even from the kindergarten level. Data. A second area they have expanded to is data. Services regarding and when I say data, I mean national repositories. Services regarding data. Some NRNs run national repositories. That most universities use. The Greek NRN, for instance, they have a big national repository that most universities use. Because this cannot be done in a very big country. Because can provide a national repository. It is different. Another area where they have been an NRN can provide a national repository. Computing. Another area where they have been moving in the past is providing computing in the beginning. So then it's more easy. Once you provide the service and you know your customers, like connectivity in the beginning, then it's more easy for you to expand to other services. Especially if there are no incumbents. So, for instance, the German NRN had difficulty moving into providing any computing service because you have very big computing centers in Germany, and they fought that. No, I mean, this is our job, right? They have not expanded. In other countries, they have not, as far as I remember, as I know at least, they have not expanded. In other countries, the NRN has expanded to providing, it has become also the supercomputing node of the country. Also. And so on. So that's why I'm saying policy. Also, it is a matter of national or regional maybe policy. What you make out of the NRN about the NRN. It is a resource. It's what your vision about the NRN.
The Botswana NRN.
So this is a general answer. Now,
because I don't want to tell you what the Botswana NRN should be doing, because I think there are other people responsible.
Thank you very much, Dr.
I just thought I would also thank you very much about data management and how we see it in LIBSENSE. So about data management and how we see it in LIBSENSE is that our experience in the last 5-6 years is that the NREN, for all the reasons you just mentioned, and the library community in country usually as a consortium of the library community in the country, are foundational pillars for this kind of environment. Librarians. So a few years ago, because we know that the librarians, the librarian of the future is evolving, so we had run a skills profiles. You would see a number of for the librarians on the LIBSENSE website. You would see a number of skills that are required for this new open access dimension. So you mentioned the data steward, but there are also the open access. There's a whole repository managers, there are archivists, because there's a whole process that the librarians are even more familiar than I am. But there are new roles. So that's in the terms of capacity building for research data management. We will need to develop some of those competencies within the librarian community. For the NREN, which is my infrastructure, which is where I come from, yes, we are doing a whole lot of providing infrastructure. We have this notion of national repositories that, sort of what's happening in Europe. At this point in time, it is easier. It's easier to run that at the national level because, like the PS mentioned, you have more common issues. So even the research that is done and the way it's processed, efficient research system is better on the national level. What we would like to do at the regional level is can integrate all of this into some distributed system that represents African research. I just sort of
Pan-African repository. I have seen somewhere.
Pan-African repository I have seen somewhere. Clarity in our conversations
it's easier enough to tag the name Africa in our conversation. It's easier enough to tag the name Africa to a repository. Doesn't mean that it's actually an Africa archive for what it claims to be. Which is a very useful. So there is an Africa archive, for instance, which is a very useful resource, but it's not, for instance, hosted in Africa. So as research networks, as African research networks, that's important to us, that the data is hosted in Africa. It's just like Botswana data. If you have data centers, then they should be hosted here, unless there's some reason not to be, for some reason to host it somewhere else.
That's another interesting discussion because in Europe we face so very often the problems that you want the national organization or you national service for the data, and then you create a national organization or you contract a national organization, and then you discover later on that they actually buy all their capacity from Amazon, and most of your data is not in Europe actually, but it's invisible to you because everything to be and therefore if you really want the everything to be guaranteed to be under your control, then you need to make special procurements, you need to factor in special conditions, some limitations to your contractors. That this stays in Africa. And this will put some limitations to your contractors.
Thank you for that great presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you for that great presentation. As I was listening to you, that the crux of the matter it seems to me is really the as I was listening to you that the crux of the matter here is really the incentive system that many academic or higher education institutions have aligned them. It's it's a culture. And I'm listening, and we're talking librarians, we're talking the NRENs themselves, which and I think that we should be higher education institutions and research centers, and I think that we should be having this conversation with the higher education institutions themselves. And fortunately, I come from one, the Botswana Open University, and my takeaway from this is that we need to go back and look at our, promotion, appointments and promotion criteria, and but I think that we need the openness into that. But I think that we need to involve all of the academic leaders to be able to realign their thinking along those lines. Because when it's about impact factors. Consider our own criteria. It's about impact factors. It's really not even about the impact in. It's about the numbers. So I think really not even about the impact or the quality or anything like that. So I think it's very important because that for me is the crux of the matter. When you've got that locked in, then everything else just falls into place. So perhaps you could provide even examples of universities that have gone that route and how they actually did it. I have my own thinking of how to do it, but it would be great to hear from you. Thank you.
It is indeed, I mean, nothing, as I said, nothing will really work if you don't sort it is indeed, I mean, nothing, as I said, nothing will really work if you don't sort this out. But of course, if you sort only this out and you don't have the infrastructure, lots of things this is the big mistake we did. So you need to do everything at the same time, and this is the big mistake we did in Europe, that we didn't sort this out early. So we spent a lot of money in many years on all the other aspects, and then we see, I mean, we have progress, but as I showed, still many problems. And this is because we didn't look at this question, and you can look at it up front from the beginning together with everything else for this. But on Friday, I gave you the problem. I didn't talking solution for this. I'm talking at this on Friday in the morning. I'm talking. I don't know how many of you will be there. I'm talking at this conference in the morning. I have a keynote on this exactly. So I thought I should not speak twice about it. So I spoke only briefly. I saw also that after and also to Omo. And I saw also that after my keynote on Friday. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Extremely good point also. Thank you. Extremely good point also. We talk more and more in the last years about co-creation. My short answer is that, we talk more and more in the last years about co-creation. That you engage with the policymakers up front. So the answer to this, I think, the generic answer is that you engage with the policymakers up front. You don't coordinate. It's not like having one meeting every year to see what you did and so on. It's you co-create. So you do the project together. They are engaged from the beginning, and I think you have some experience in Botswana also about this. I'm not sure it happens in all areas, but I think that's an important part of the answer.
Oh, that's quite insightful. Please put your hands together for Dr. Glenos. Oh, that's quite insightful. Please put your hands together. If you want to hear more about this, then you should be at the UbuntuNet Connect. If you want to hear more about this, then you should be at the UbuntuNet Connect 2022 at the Pakalani Golf Resort. So I'm sure we'll all congregate there. Dr. Glenos is one of the keynote speakers there. So I'm sure we'll all congregate there. All right, so time is fast spent, and we just want to do two things before we come back. We want to take a group photo quickly, just 2 minutes. Pascaline is Pascaline here. We can have breakfast. So the dignitaries, Pascaline is Pascaline here. The dignitaries, Pascaline will lead you to the allocated venue for the breakfast. And then the rest of us right now will go with Percy. Percy is just standing outside here. But first, we want to take group photo right now. Thank you very much. Up there. So Percy will come back. Percy is going to lead us not more than 30 minutes. Photo. Thank you very much. We'll come back in not more than 30 minutes. Thank you.